June 17th, I think, 2019. I'm John Travis in Novato, California, and I am very fortunate to have Elaine Sullivan in Farmers Branch, Texas. And we've just spent 15 minutes getting connected, and here we are.
Mostly because I couldn't find the camera.
So what we're going to do today is pick your brain as one of probably the leading lady of wellness. I think we could safely call you the leading lady of wellness.
You're very sweet.
Well, just historically, three of us, one of whom I just interviewed, Don Ardell, and me, and a guy named Bill Hetler, were kind of the triumvirate, and then we pulled in Bob Allen, who's no longer with us on the planet. And it was all these white men doing wellness. And then someone had this brilliant idea to get Elaine Sullivan on board. And you became, that's, I believe, the leading lady of wellness.
Oh.
So let's start with how you got, you were actually in Stevens Point before any of this happened.
Right.
But tell us how you got, there and what led you to becoming the leading lady of wellness.
Well, what happened was I was hired at the University of Wisconsin in Stevens Point, and when I went there were the 18-year-old drinking laws, and I couldn't stand seeing these students go to the bars to meet each other. So I started an experience in my apartment where I would invite a wing of guys and a wing of girls to my apartment, and I would spend 3 hours and I would have them tell their stories to each other.
Wow.
It was so amazing. This was back in 1969, and they loved it, and the word spread all over the campus, and before long I had over 1,000 students a semester in my apartment at night, and we would do these 3-hour sessions on story and connection and music, and it was so beautiful, and I learned the power of story at that time. So Fred Liefgren, who also worked in wellness, was my boss, and he said, I want you to go to this conference and talk about what you're doing. And I went, what are you talking about? What am I going to talk about? And he said, tell them what you're doing. So I did go to this conference, and I did share my experience with these students and the power of story, and I got a standing ovation.
Where was the conference?
It was in Stevens Point. It was a conference of educators from all around.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So then Fred said, well, I think you ought to keynote the wellness conference. And the wellness conference was very young at that time. I think we were having about 400 people. And I went, Fred, he goes, I want you to tell them about your work with stories. And so I did. And I got another standing ovation. And that was the beginning. And my work in wellness was about the power of our own story. That if I'm really going to be well, I have to do the work I need to do to understand my own story and who I am. And that's life work. We never get finished with that. Mm-hmm. So that's how I brought story into the wellness work, because for me, story embodies mind, body, spirit, health. And the emphasis was primarily, you know that, John, primarily on physical wellness at that time. And I believe that there was another whole dimension, that was the dimension of the spiritual and the emotional wellness. And I saw that embodied in story after story. So that's how I got into it. And I still believe that that's the heart of it. I still believe that's the heart of it.
And what you're doing with the story is connecting people. And my belief in the 6 words that describe everything I've done is the currency of wellness is connection. And that's what you were doing with story.
Absolutely, John. And you know, your wellness workbook was like my handbook. I mean, I used it because I really believe that in the wellness workbook, the very core of what wellness was about was being written about by you, but I didn't necessarily see it being done. And I believe, I'm a firm believer that relationships are the essence of wellness. And if I don't know my own story and I don't hold a space for other people to share their story, then the disconnection is rampant. And we have so much of that today.
Massive disconnection, yeah.
Massive, yes.
And what's interesting is that Halbert Dunn in the 50s identified wellness, high-level wellness, with physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. But it very quickly got watered down by people glomming onto the term and mainly physical. Now, Fred and Bill and Denny, the three guys, the triumvirate there at Stevens Point, organized the conference. And now, how did you infiltrate that old boys network?
Well, I knew them well because I worked with Denny in the center, and Fred was my boss, and Bill was our doctor. And they knew what I was doing with students around the power of story and connection and relationships. And they were also very interested in doing something to minimize the alcoholism among our students, the drinking. And so they listened to me, and that's when Fred asked me to keynote the conference, and I went, no way, I'm not going to do that. And he goes, yes, you are. He said, I just want you to go and talk about what you're doing here on the campus to invite relationships and to work with story. And that's what I did, John. And that was the beginning of my working with the Wellness Conference. And then they invited me on to be an advisor. I was surprised about that. But I knew that I could tell them what was my reality, what I had learned, what I knew. And then, of course, from being an advisor, I was invited onto the board and worked with that board, well, you know, for quite a long time. So yeah, it was all by accident.
Well, I know my first memorable experience with you, I met you, I think, up at Lake Louise at that Campbell's Soup event.
I do too.
That was where I first met you. But what really struck me was when when you did a keynote at the Century Insurance Auditorium up there north of the campus.
Right.
And you had 1,000 people crying. And I thought, oh, this woman has got some power.
I remember that so well. And what I remember about it also was that I told them that they couldn't leave the auditorium unless they got 12 hugs.
I don't remember that.
I'll never forget that because it was like, what? And I went, no, that'll be your energy for today. And then the place just broke wide open. It was amazing. I got to the cafeteria and there were a whole line of people giving hugs before you went into lunch. And it was all so spontaneous, and it was actually quite exciting for me because I do believe that. You know, I do believe in the power of touch and healthy touch. And so, and I also always believed that laughter was a really important part of wellness, and that I have to learn how to take myself really seriously, but I also have to learn how to take myself really lightly. And
exactly, yeah.
And with you, when we used to do some of the workshops together, remember, we would not let anybody tell what they did for the first 2 days.
Right. No shop talk.
They could only talk about who they were. And what's been really interesting for me is that I've become very involved in the Parker Palmer work. And Parker's, all of his writings are about, we teach who we are, we lead who we are, that who we are is the message. And I believe that with all my heart. And I see the power of that when I work in retreats and colleges today. We did a lot with what do you teach and how do you teach and when do you teach and blah, 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 but never who is the teacher.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying way back in wellness. Who
I've
are,
always gone with the saying, we teach what we need to learn.
that's right.
And some of us aren't aware of that.
That's right.
No accident that I'm in wellness.
I think that I had to learn a lot. That's why I taught it.
Yeah, I remember Parker Palmer was, and also you introduced me to Harville Hendricks back then too.
Great guy. And they, and of course their work is based in the story, you know. What do you carry inside yourself? What, I mean, I did a lot of work with the beautiful child that we all have, and how do we understand that? How do we nurture it? How do we use the gifts that are there? How do we own our shadows and our dark side? And I still believe that that's the heart of wellness.
Amen.
And that, I do. I believe
the shadow issue is the hardest one to talk about. I formed a group in Australia and one here in California where we practice owning our shadow projections. And it is not easy. And some of the people, you know, Yvonne, my partner, when I first met her, I don't have a shadow.
Yeah.
But,
for
she's
me,
very into it now. And she saw that I had one. So
I think that's still the most difficult part of knowing our story. And today I use the 4 paradoxes that in my story work, I have to learn to own my gifts and my wounds. I have to learn to own my weaknesses and my strengths. I have to learn to own my shadow and my light, and I have to learn to own my limitations and my possibilities. And that's life work. We're never finished with that.
Exactly. And it's in a culture that's shame-based and dominator-oriented, it's hard. So that's why I've sought out situations where I can get some practice doing it. And it's rare. Like the community I live in, there's 400 people, and I know about 100 of them, and there were about 20 or 30 who I thought were possibilities. So I did a little screening with an article I wrote on that, send it out to them, and depending on their response, we invited them to join this group or not. And some of them were like into spiritual bypassing, and you know, it's all flow and glow, and that was a quick way of deciding who's willing to do this. And even so, we struggle with it. You know, we've learned to use NVC tools and Susan Campbell's work, and it's an ongoing thing because the culture is so biased against it.
Absolutely, I so agree with you. And I'm always so grateful because you were really one of my mentors in this work. And because
as you are me.
when I first read the Wellness Workbook, I went, "Oh my God, this is great! This is exactly what I believe in." And I've watched you walk in so many ways and down so many paths in understanding what wellness really is about. And today, more than when we started the wellness conference 40 years ago, we need it so much in our society today.
Yeah.
God, yes.
Wow. Yes.
And I think about all the wonderful human beings I met through the wellness movement, all the beautiful leaders and people who brought so much to my life and to so many people's lives.
It's sad to me how the Stevens Point events, which were so fantastic, have devolved over the years to a hotel conference room in Florida as the next one. Like, wow.
Too, because I always felt like one of the really powerful parts of the conference was the place and the connections that were made, and because we walked on the same campus and we ate on the same campus, and we were like confined in a way.
And we had the dorm rooms. I took a group once and we had a whole wing of a dorm.
I know.
We wound up having people piles, and
I have a lot of great memories of the dorm. Some of them I won't say.
Well, yeah, there were a few that will remain our secret. But
Yeah.
what's interesting is I dragged Meg Jordan there one year. She was reluctant to come, I think, and
I remember.
then she got attacked by some right-wing Christians, quotes, because she was talking about some feminist values or something. And I remember sitting in a dorm room and she was crying. Then she
Oh,
became the president.
oh.
And now she lives a block away from me. We recruited her
Oh,
to
you're
join this
kidding.
wonderful community. Yeah.
I didn't know she was out there with you.
Yeah, she lived in San Rafael she bought a place 10 years ago. I'll be interviewing her next, so this will be.
Great lady.
But we have this wonderful community of mobile homes that, we're trailer trash, is what Yvonne says. But it's incredible people. And she moved here last year and loves it.
I'm so glad. I did not know that. I did not know that. Oh.
Yeah, she's in the group that meets every other week, our family.
Big hug for me.
I shall. I'll be seeing her. She's taking me to the airport or tomorrow night to fly out to Kent's. And
oh, nice.
yeah.
Are you still talking around the country?
No, I'm a has-been. I don't get invitations anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm going out to stay with Kent Peterson in Charlottesville because I have a lot of friends there. And then we're going up to Boston where I went to medical school, and just generally it's a vacation we do every year. And we do, speaking of connection, Kent and Pat and Yvonne and I do couples coaching every day when we're there. We sit down for an hour or two and we go into our shadow stuff with each other, because Kent is my perfect mirror of, we were twins separated at birth, I think.
That's wonderful. Oh
we
God.
trigger each other. We used to trigger each other all the time. We're getting much better at it now.
Well,
But,
John, that in itself is incredible that you're
yeah,
doing that.
it's been, and then we do a Skype session once a month when we're not there, but we do it daily when we're there, and it's a delight.
That's
So
good.
Well, historically, a little more, you were at Stevens Point from the 60s through the 70s?
I left in 72.
Uh-huh.
And Joe and I got married in 72 and moved to Chicago. And
that's right.
I worked with stories at the community colleges. So I've read and studied and worked with over 2,500 people writing their story in depth, not little stories. And it's those stories that have taught me what I know and what I continue to pass on. I saw incredible pattern in people's stories.
And we've just started here in the park a biography night where two people share their story for 20 minutes.
Oh, I love that.
I'll be going in August. We had the first one last month, and it was
that's wonderful. Oh my gosh, I'd love to do that with a group.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you were in Texas when I met you. So what led you to Texas?
I went to Joe took a job at a community college here in Dallas, Brookhaven, and I came and I took a job at Richland College, and I continued the work with written autobiographies. And it was during the time that I was here that I met Parker Palmer, and I went back to Madison and was trained by Parker Palmer to help train other people to do his work. And that's really what I do today. I just got finished with a week-long training in Comfort, Texas, where we work with faculty from around the country, and we work with them on how to set up circles of trust where there's safety, where there's no fixing, no advising, nothing
Amen.
like that. Just deep listening. And it's really interesting. One of the people I mentor is at Valencia College in Florida, and I've been working with them for 20 years in Parker's work, and they have developed a very strong peace and justice faculty. And they work in the community with the gay community, the Muslim community, the Black community, the poor, the police, the garbage collectors. You cannot believe this work. Anyway, the person who runs the program is, and I've worked with her for 20 years, is Rachel Allen. And she was just invited to the UN to speak about peace and justice. And she used our basic, what we call our touchstones, for creating safe space for people to really show up, to be who they are, and and for us to listen. And they loved her. There were about 40 nations there. So I feel really, really good with the work that's being done. Very.
Wow. So this is mainly community college people?
Yeah,
That you're
it's a Valencia Community College in Orlando.
Uh-huh.
Oh, you should look it up. It's amazing what they're doing. And it's all based in Parker's work. And they've got, it's in the community, which is what I really love. And so, but they hold what they call the guidelines for good talking. And basically it's just no fixing, no advice giving, only deep listening, watching your own assumptions, watching your own judgments, turning to wonder and wondering about things. It's a beautiful program. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, you moved to Texas, and then you were coming regularly to the conferences, and then we had an event in Ohio you came to and stirred things up, and
I love doing that. I do. Yeah, I worked for over 40 some years with the Wellness Conference.
Yeah.
I proudly display my Albert Dunn Award. That means so much to me because I think he was such a great man. And you taught me about him.
Well, and I've learned a lot more recently when I discovered he had children, and met connected with his granddaughter, and I interviewed his daughter-in-law before he died. All the sons were dead by the time I found out that he had children.
Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah, he was a great man.
He was.
A true pioneer.
So where do you see your career going in the next 20, 30 years?
Well, John, I turned 84 this year, so I still work full-time. I still have a full-time private practice, and I especially work with married couples. And I travel, and I do retreats. I'm leaving Sunday for a week-long retreat I'm giving at Kirkridge in Bangor, Pennsylvania, the Kirkridge Retreat Center, for people from around the country who do Parker's work. I don't intend to give it up till I can't.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm still working full time. I love the work, and I really don't see any reason to stop doing it.
No.
When I had cancer 6 years ago, my doctor said, "I'm not going to treat you like you're in your mid-70s. You don't act like it." And I said, and I don't think like it either. I said, "I'm going to continue to do what I need to do to stay alive and to use my mind and my body and my gifts and continue to do my own shadow work." And so that's where I am, John.
Yeah, well, how was the cancer for you? What was that experience?
How was what?
The cancer experience.
It was terrifying. I mean, when I never expected to have cancer. And so what I did was I had chemo 1 week, and then I worked 2 weeks. And then I had chemo 1 week, and I worked 2 weeks for 6 months. And I had a mastectomy, and I'm cancer-free. And I feel like it invited me to have compassion like I never have had before. So this week when Kevin had the bladder cancer, it was like, oh no.
Yeah.
I'd rather have it than have my son have it. Well, we got such good news today about it being contained and that he doesn't have to have chemo. So, but it brought back a lot of memories for me.
I'll bet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it did. It did. But yeah, it's just one of those things in life that invite you to grow with it or become cynical or whatever. And I feel like I grew with mine. I do. And I feel I have a lot of compassion for people dealing with it today because it's not easy. Not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we're reaching a completion here, and I'm just delighted that I think we should create a First Lady of Wellness certificate.
You're so funny. You're so funny. But the great joy of my life, one of the great joys, was being a part of the wellness movement. I loved it. I loved all of the conferences I went to, all the conferences I addressed, all the people I met, all I learned. I learned so much from so many people. And so, yeah, it was a very big part of my ride on this planet. And you were a very important part.
And also what you did that I alluded to earlier, but I haven't really said it clearly, is you brought the feminine into the organization that was sorely needed. And
I do own that. I really
yeah.
do own that.
Yeah, and then well, Sandy Queen showed up, and you brought you even had Naomi Judd come one year.
Oh yeah.
And,
yeah, we brought a lot of wonderful women to keynote that conference, like Rachel Remen and Joan Borysenko and Naomi, and people of that caliber who really brought a lot of feminine energy.
Yeah, yeah, which it would not have happened without you. I think you were the foundation. So again, First Lady of Wellness.
Thank you so much, John. I love you so much. Thank you so much.
Oh, me too. Take care.
I could talk to you all night, but I need to go too.
Yeah, I'm going to turn off the recording here. Let's see how to do it. I'm trying to read the screen. Okay, stop recording.